Hello. Hey, Gayatri, am I audible?
Yes, Mufassil, we can hear you. You can start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Mufassil Patel. I have more than 10 plus years of experience. Currently, I'm working as a solution architect in Reliance Jio, and previously I was working in TCS. So, most of my actually my I work most on server side, and currently working as a solution architect. And As you know, in Reliance Jio, we have more than 10 crores of customers. So we, to handle those number of hits, we have migrated to microservices and all. And if you okay, let's start first. Let me share my screen first. Yeah, are you guys able to see my screen? One second. Okay. Okay, then let's start. Um I think all of you have gone through the sessions, right? These upgrade sessions. Here, API backend part one, and I cover all these API and uh, API is nothing but application programming interface. So you are you, you are a client, and in a monolithic architecture, what we previously do in a one second actually one second. Someone is there. One second. Yeah. Um, what previously we do, suppose we work, we are working in a JSP servlet environment. What we do, we normally write Java server-side code, and we use JSP, JSF, something like this, and we just write some what we can say APIs there, and we call it from the JSP, and how we maintain the calls, user authentication and all. It's just a normal call, and we send we everything we say in the session, and every time we have to maintain session, we have to maintain all everything in cookies and all. So if we want to deploy those such applications, and then we what we do, we have to make it's the war file, jar file, something, and we deploy it on server, and the UI part, the server side part, all these things we put into the war file and deploy. So if you want to change something, then we every time we have to make do the same thing for the deployment. We have to change. Suppose in a JavaScript we have a small change. We change it, and we compile all Java files and all. So if we have only change in the client side, then we have to compile server side code and everything, and we have to deploy whole Java project. So and only one client can access those server-side APIs. Suppose we are making a website, then only that from web browser we can access those APIs. And if you want to uh, implement or call those APIs from mobile app, then we have to write another code, for mobile. So this is the main disadvantage of monolithic architecture. So to avoid this, these we use actually distinguish these things. We distinguish client side thing separately and server side thing separately. So as you know, we use MVC architecture in our applications. So in today's scenario, what we do MVC, we follow MVC architecture at the server side also and on client side also. We use the MVC architecture at client side. Suppose if you take an example of AngularJS or React.js, or suppose any Node.js application or something. So there also we maintain the MVC architecture. So what is the advantage of using such type of architecture? Suppose I have to write server-side code only once, and it can be accessible from any platform like browser or mobile app or anything. So the main advantage of writing such APIs and using web services is any platform can access our APIs. So no need to write code for separate platform. So actually, I was explaining about API. So we write those to avoid monolithic architecture. We goes with the such type of architecture where we follow MVC architecture and all. So previously we used JSP servlet. After that, what Struts framework comes, then EJB comes. Then EJB have some disadvantage. So comes now Spring Boot comes. So every time technology is changing, and we are what we can say we are uh, making our application more stable, more reliable, and mainly all these things are scalable, easily scalable. We no need to deploy each and everything every time on the server. Suppose uh, suppose take an example of Geo mobile apps. We have more than 14 plus mobile apps on Play Store, and take an example of MyGeo app. MyGeo app is installed in more than 5 crores of users, and daily we have millions of hits on our server. So previously we write such a code where we just write some APIs there, and they continuously hit on our server. Actually, we have big servers. They have big processor, memory, and all, and they hit our server, and we fetch the data. We use caching mechanism and everything, and send the data to the app or any application or anything from where the request comes. So how we are serving such type of user, such a big number of users, how we are serving. We make such an APIs which are independent, which are we can say what we can say. Suppose if you use monolithic type architecture, then it is bound only for mobile app or only browser or something. And not only use the mobile app, but also portals, our internal apps, and everyone using the same server side code. And we have written it only once. So in a you can say suppose technology is changing day by day. So we have to change these things, because the usage of internet is increasing day by day, and everyone wants zero delay in their whatever transaction they are doing or something, whatever they are using, mobile app, website or anything. So previously we use such type of APIs and all. We write some web services, so based REST web services and all. So right now we are migrating to microservices, and for load balancing we are using Kafka, and these load balancer, Nginx, and these things. So the basic is first to understand these this technology, we have to first go from the scratch. Take your examples. First, you learn about basic Java. First, you learn about object-oriented programming like C++ or something. Then you go to Java. Then you learn about JSP Servlet. Then you go to Spring Boot, like that. So APIs are the basic things. If you want to learn about these things, first we have to learn about what is API. So API is nothing but the application programming interface. Suppose we have an application and we need to send some data to the another platform, or another, what we can say, to the client, suppose client. So it requires some communication channel. So API is just provide the channel to share the data. Uh, uh, I'm not going to the practical definition. I'm just explaining why we use the APIs and all. So you must heard about the web services, and you just think what is web services and what is API, what is the difference between them. You can say both are same. The basic difference is what you can say. Web services works on different suppose software, different totally different environment. What suppose two different computers, network, and the API works on two different applications. So it is a API is a part of the web services. So you can use web services or you can use API anytime. You can say both are same actually. The basic difference is only it works on network, and APIs website works on network, and APIs works on two different applications. So when to use APIs? I just said whenever you want to share some data to the client, we use APIs, and we just take the request and send the response like this. And the two types of APIs we use, REST and SOAP-based web services, or API. We can say SOAP-based web services or SOAP-based APIs. We can use anything. So what is the difference between SOAP and REST? Actually, I think you guys gone through the upgrad session. So I'm just going to the upgrad session, and I can explain better from here, because you learn from these sessions. So I'm just going to explain these things from upgrad directly. So I think this is the session one batch. Okay, this is backend session, and okay, let's go to first introduction of web services. I just said where we use web services and all. Uh, Here they explain about the monolithic web application. In monolithic applications, we have single code base and single executable file. Like I just said, if you have single executable file, then every time for small changes, we have to deploy the whole application. So to avoid this monolithic architecture, we use MVC type architecture. So, okay. Advantages of creating such applications are it makes your website more scalable. You can reduce the code base from for both mobile and regular websites. Uh, and here they have given some examples, Twitter and all. Suppose where we use APIs. Suppose we have to implement Google Map in our mobile app. So and then we use Google Map APIs to get the lat long of current location of user, or we get we show traffic on the map or something. So all this data comes to the Google APIs. So these gives the data. You can call those APIs from mobile or from browser, or you can directly hit those APIs in Postman or anywhere in browser, or anywhere you will get the response. So this is the main advantage of using APIs web services. So all these are explained here. Advantages of API. Yeah, here's a main important thing. Web services here, they have explained web services, and so Yeah, same thing is explained here. Web service is used when we have shared data between different networks. Okay, do you guys have any question? Let me check the chat. Where it is. Okay, if you guys have any question, then directly type here in question answer. Okay, so I'm moving ahead right now. So here in first session, I explain all the what is API, what is web services, advantages of using web services APIs. Okay, what is endpoint? Yeah, for calling any API, you need their endpoints. Like suppose you want to fetch data of a user, particular user, or you want to get, suppose I just talk about the Google Map APIs. You want to get the hospital list in your area, so you just call the Google API slash hospital list or something. Then it will give you the all hospital list. So uh, the for calling this API, you need a URL. Suppose googlemap.com slash their key or something, and then hospital list URL something. So these are the API endpoints. To get the data from the server, you need API endpoints. Suppose here in example, they are just explained a movie. If you are to book a movie ticket, then movie slash ad, you want to get the all movies running in nearest theater, so you just call the movies URL, so it will give the information like that. Okay, request and response, yeah. For calling any web service, uh, you have to first agree on some basic what you can say basic agreement. Suppose a server, you want to sign up a user, you want to register a user, then you have to send its first name, last name, date of birth, time of birth, address, these parameters. And on a server side, and they just get the data and insert it into the database and send response to the calling request. So first, before making any API, you must have to agree on some common agreement that this should be my request, and this response will I get if request successfully executed. Then this response will come, or if any validation fails, or if any server side exception comes, then this type of exception will come. This HTTP status code will come. You must have to agree first on a request on response before creating any kind of web service or any kind of API. So based or REST API. So what is request? Let me take my example here. Suppose this one. This is my personal project, and I'm just explaining you how to sign up a user. Here, suppose this one. Uh, Here we are using HTTP method as a post because we are sending data over HTTP. So whenever you sending data, then you must have to use post method, and HTTP supports this. I think near about 15 methods, HTTP methods, to call any type of web service or API. So first is get. Uh, Get is used to retrieve the data from the server, post to upload the data, and put to update anything, patch for same thing, delete, copy. All these are used for as an HTTP methods. Mostly we use get and post, and to update, put, or and to delete. Only these 4 to 5 HTTP methods we mostly use. And headers. you must for calling any API, you must have to define your header type, because suppose we are sending server is expecting XML data, or server is expecting any media type, image, MP3 or something, and you are sending JSON, then this request will not be execute. You must have to have same content type on both sides, in a request and from client side, and on the server side at the controller. So you have to set the content type, what type of data you are sending. For sign up, suppose I am sending this JSON data. So I have to write here in header, my content type is application JSON. Okay, if you guys have any question, just type here. Okay. Okay. Um, uh, this JSON is I'm sending this JSON to register user on the server. So, and I have to set uh, application slash JSON, because I'm sending JSON data. So this is the request, I can say. And if I hit this API, then I'll get the response from the server as a response. Suppose, yeah, here I'm just getting a doctor's list. So it gives me HTTP status as read, and it returns all doctor list to me. So this is the response. I get this response from server. So, but to handle this response, suppose I'm calling this from mobile app, Android app. So before calling, I must know what would be my response, where the first name is coming, where it is the response is coming in array format, or what will be the key and what will be the value, because in JSON we have key and value pairs. So to write any kind of code, we first we must know what is the key and what value we have to fetch. So in request response, uh, here in request response of any web service or any API, we must have to follow some format. We have to first decide this request structure and response structure. Okay, that's about the request and response. And yeah, request and response, we can use any type of request response, XML, JSON, or anything. Here you can see how many type of yeah, here you can send text, normal plain text, JSON, JavaScript, XML, HTML, anything. So mostly for SOAP based and REST APIs, we mostly use JSON and XML. Yeah, here is saying, how does an application know the format or structure of request response? Actually, it is, I just said, it is a service definition. You must have to agree on some common terms, what would be the request and what would be the response. Then only you can write any kind of code. So yeah, what is WSDL and this thing I will cover in SOAP and REST API difference. So in next slide, I will just explain SOAP and REST APIs. What is the API protocol? Okay, let me explain what is HTTP protocol. I think it is in next. Let me go click on next. Yeah, here first to check what is SOAP and REST architecture. I just said we use XML and JSON as a what is it, in a request and response. So SOAP is nothing but a simple object access protocol. And for web service, suppose I'm writing any web service and it is a SOAP. So it only takes only the XML. It uses only XML, and in RESTful APIs, it takes JSON, XML, or any kind of input. So uh, so when to use SOAP and when we have to use REST APIs, it is totally depends on the developer. Suppose uh, REST APIs gives a full flexibility of using any type of type of what you can say request and response, like in JSON, XML, or anything, and it uses I think they have explained here what is the difference between REST and SOAP here. No strict data exchange format, JSON or XML. In as I said, in REST APIs, you can send JSON, XML, any format. But in SOAP, you must have to use only XML. And in SOAP, it uses the visual. And there is no any standard for REST APIs. And as I said, it is totally depend on developer, and developer mostly choose REST APIs because it is easy to implement, and it is lightweight because JSON, it is easy to extract data from JSON as compared to XML. HTTP protocol. Uh, for calling any web services or APIs, we use the HTTP protocol as yeah, HTTP means hypertext transfer protocol. It's a stateless, so yeah, whenever you call HTTP, you call HTTP API or any web services, you must know about what are the HTTP methods, what are the content type, what are the HTTP status codes. So suppose I just show here, after calling any API, if it is successfully executed, then you will get 200 as a HTTP status code. So 200 means you have sent some request and it is executed successfully, and server returns data to you. Then 200 comes. If it is 500, then something went wrong at the server side. Any exception occurs at server side, then 500 comes. If page is not available, then 404. If you are signed up on a server, register user on server, then you will get 201, like this. So there are lots of HTTP status code. So I just cover here some HTTP status code here. I think here some codes are explained here. The difference between URL and URI. This is the easy part. You can say this whole URL, HTTP is the domain name and it's the endpoint, commonly called as a URL, and if it is only www dot this domain and your endpoint, then it is a URI, and only this what we get the endpoint, that means it is URL. Yeah, I just explained what is HTTP request and response. These are the methods. We mostly use only get, post, put, delete, and patch. Others are there, as you can see here. But these are mostly these. No one use these HTTP methods. Mostly we use only get, post, put, patch, delete. Header, I just explained what is header. In header, we sends what would be the content type, and it is always in key and value pair. Suppose I'm sending JSON data, then content type application / JSON or XML, anything. So, and the body, in body we send JSON data, XML data, or anything. Yeah, common status code 201, 200, 401, 403, 404, 500. Is explained in a better way. All the one axis are the informational, all two axis is the success. Like I just said, 200 is a success. Okay, 201 created like this. So all comes in between 200 to 299. It is that means success, and all in the from the 300 to 399 are the redirection HTTP status codes, and all the four axes are the client side errors. Suppose any on server side, I have to send date of birth, but I am sending any string data, or suppose server is expecting date and I am sending string. Server is expecting integer and I am sending something else. Then all these client side errors are comes into the 4xx, and in 5xx all server side errors like null pointer exception, or if server throws any exception, then it comes from 500 plus. Yeah, HTTP status was 200, content type JSON, XML or anything, and in body I just explain what is request and response. And data types in JSON, you can write give anything. This is the main advantage of JSON. You can pass any type of data in JSON, and JSON works in key value pair. If you guys have any doubt, just put it into the question answer section. Yeah, the web API section is explained in a very good manner here. Suppose we have a web server, and they take example of a kitchen. Suppose in a hotel, whenever we order something, the waiter works as a API carrier, and whenever we give order, we give so suppose in a technical manner, we give an API call, and the order is nothing but your request body, and the request carrier goes into the kitchen. That means you're on your server, and according to your request and your API call, it serves you. It gives you the response. So in this video, it is explained in a well manner about the web API. Okay, I just explain what is SOAP and REST architecture. Yeah, actually, I just noted down some points in PPT. So I explain all these things here. So in API, actually, I have written some definitions here about the API. API is nothing but an interface that defines how the client interacts with the different functionalities of web services. I just explained these. If you want to get some data from the server, then we need APIs, and API serves the mediator between the client and whatever data we need from the server. We just request an API, and API gives the required result to the request. So this is the API, and basically an API specifies how software components should interact. I just said before creating an API, we must know why we are using those API. We must have some common agreement that for this functionality, you have to call this API, and this API must have this request, and this API will return if it gets successfully executed, then it will use such type of response. If you have validation error or server side error or something, then it will return some type of exception errors in the response. So all these things are the mutually understandable, or mutually what we can say is an agreement between the server and the client. So API are the intermediator between them. Okay, someone has asked the question. Uh, is SOAP-based web services recommended for newly developing products? I'm just repeating the question. Is SOAP-based web services recommended for newly developing products? Actually, it is it totally depends on your what you can say your requirement. Suppose I have to make some APIs which will give you some what you can say. Let me give you some example here. Uh, suppose I have to give you some basic data. Like I just said, I, on Google Map, you want to know the nearest hospital list, your nearby hospital list. Then you just call the Google API and you will get the data in JSON. So it will return near about 100 or 1000 hospital lists. Then if you use XML, then it would be difficult to extract the data from XML. If it is JSON, then JSON is lightweight. You can easily extract data from JSON. So it is totally depend on the requirement and depend on the developer how they can easily implement those things. So it is not recommended to use every time. So it is depend on your requirement. If it is whenever you don't know who will use your APIs, then you can and suppose I will give you one example about SOAP. When we use SOAP, suppose there is a system TIPCO. You must heard about the TIPCO. Like TIPCO is used. Okay, if you don't know TIPCO, then take an example of SAP. Uh, and this SAP have some data, and SAP or TIPCO anything has data about the user, or I just said the hospital list or something, and they don't know who will call those APIs, and suppose it is implemented somewhere, and as a I'm on another network. I want to get those things. Suppose TIPCO have some data, and they are on another network, and I'm in another network. So and in this scenario, SOAP APIs is good, because both are in different network. And if we are in the we have different application but in the same network, then what you can say, REST APIs are good. So uh, yeah, Suman has asked this question. So Suman, uh, you are asking when soap based are recommended. So the answer is, whenever you have different network, then you can go with the soap. If you are communicating between two application, then go with REST APIs. And you are asking which is better, XML or JSON? Yeah, actually it is depend on developer. As per my opinion, JSON is best, because JSON is easy to parse, is lightweight, and XML is also lightweight, but what happened? Sometimes developer forgot to end the tag. Suppose in XML we have starting and ending tag. Sometimes we forgot to end the tag, or sometimes error happens while generating XML. So uh, both have their advantages, disadvantages. So as per my opinion, go with REST if you have a small kind of small kind of data while communicating between client and server. Then you go with the REST. And if you have if you are communicating between two different systems, and from the different network, then go with the SOAP based web services. Okay, I think I'm okay, I think no, there's no another question. I was thinking there's another question. Okay, let's move ahead. Here is the done option. Okay, I can see that there's a done option when I answered the question. Okay, leave it. Okay, here I just explain what is the API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it is a which is a protocol used as an interface by software components to communicate with each other. And difference between web service and APIs, I just explained you what is the difference. It is web services are between the two machines over the network, and API acts the interface between two different applications so that they can communicate with each other. And API exactly defines the method of one software program to interact with the other. When this action involves sending data over a network, web service comes into Okay, these are the theoretical things. If you have any doubt between web service API or anything, just type in question answer. Okay. When to use API, I just explained. The disadvantages of monolithic architecture, how API solve this monolithic architecture problem, and I just explain advantages of the APIs, SOAP and REST APIs. I just explained the limitations of how SOAP-based and REST architecture works, and difference between both. API endpoints. Let me give some example of API endpoints. I think so here in this session they explain in better way the API endpoints. Here it is. Okay, leave it. API endpoints is nothing but how you differentiate your API. Suppose here, give me one example on my here is an example of my personal project. So I have to register some profiles on the server. So I'm using my domain name, port, and profile. And so here. To get the profile, I'm just yeah, to add the profile, I'm just writing profile and using post method. Then server understands this is the post method. User want to add some profiles. So same URL. Suppose here get profile by ID. Here I'm just I'm calling the same URL and just giving the profile ID so that server will give profile details in the response. And here I'm using get method. So in a controller, I will just write the in URL path. I just write the profile ID and something like that, and it will give in response. It will just give the profile details. So these are the these are the endpoints, the API endpoints. Okay, let's move ahead. Yeah, I just explained what is HTTP protocol, HTTP methods, this is status code, header, body, content type. I just explained in content type you have to write which type of data you are sending to the server, application size, JSON, XML, string, text, whatever content type is there, you have to mention it in the header. HTTP authorization, yeah, this one is pending. I will take this in API backend part 2. Right now I'm in part 1. So authorization will comes in the second section. Yeah, examples, API examples. I just I'll give you example about Google Map API. Google Map APIs we can use in Android app, in any website or anywhere. And similar thing, YouTube. You can implement in your personal app. You can use YouTube API and play video in your app. So YouTube provides some public APIs to play the videos in your app, in your browser or anywhere. think for Flickr, Twitter, Amazon, and in our upgrade example, ProMan. So in ProMan we have sign up API where we register user and for getting the data get user API and all. Okay, let me explain you the example back in our first session. This example. I think you must have download the ProMan code and run on your local machine. So I also downloaded the code. Actually, I haven't installed Postgres, so I just download and go through the code. So I haven't run it. So I just explain you what is the Swagger, how we write APIs, how to call those APIs, how we use JPA, how we use the Hibernate, and whatever technologies we have used in ProMan. I explain these things one by one. Here in ProMan we use Maven, Spring Boot, MVC architecture is followed here. So let me go to one by one. Yeah. If you guys have any question about this ProMan project, you can type in the question. ProMan now sign up and get user API. In ProMan, we use Maven. You guys must know what is Maven. Maven, instead of Maven, you can use Gradle. You can use Ant. These all are the building tools. These used for downloading dependencies, defining the dependencies, or making a war file, jar file for Maven use. So in ProMan, we use Maven, and let me then explain Maven first. I think it is explained better in this. Okay, first we will I will explain about Maven. First, we go through the these points. Endpoint. I just explain what is endpoints. An API endpoint is like a remote function that you can call from another application. Same thing. I just said, suppose we have a sign up API. The actual sign up function, sign up what we can say business logic is written over the server. Then from a client side, how we can call those business logic, or how we call the actual sign up function. So API comes into the picture. A client calls the API, and API calls the server functions like sign up function or whatever written on the server. If you want to call those things, so we use APIs to interact with the server. So API is nothing. API endpoint nothing but your your path to which we have to call it from the client side. So API endpoint is like remote function that you can call from another application to with a backend. Okay, I think we have some questions. Okay, Suchi is asking, she is not able to see the Swagger UI, and her program is not connecting to the database. Okay, I think have you installed Postgres on your local machine? Just check. One second, let me go into the code. Suppose this is application.yml. And just maximize it. Here, you have to check what number you are given, what is your database name, your database username and password. You have to give this password or whatever you have set. So, and what version of Postgres you are using, and what is your database name, username, password, and everything. Can you please explain how Spring Boot takes care of the configuration required by the Spring Form? Okay, I'll just explain. So when to use Maven and when to use Gradle. It depends. I will explain the difference between Ant, Maven, Gradle. Okay, so she's saying she has used the version 9.5. Okay, in Proman example also, I think they are taken 9.5. I think. Okay, then you must have to check your the database configuration first. And if you have anything changed, then just change it to the application.yml file. Just check this thing. And before going this, just try to connect this database from normal application. Just write one Java program to connect to the database. Check if you are able to connect to the database. Then uh, you will get understanding of what is you are doing wrong with this connecting to the database. Suchi, your Maven project built successfully, or it is giving some error or something? You can type here. Yeah, okay. Maven build is successful. Okay. Then you must have. Okay, you can connect with Postgres and check if it is, database is there and the tables are getting created or not. If it build successful, then table must have to, created there. So just check that one. That thing. Okay. Next question was. Can you please explain how Spring Boot take care of configuration required by the Spring firm? Yeah. Uh, uh, Spring Boot configuration. First, let me explain you this. This actually, in Spring Boot, you need an entry point. You need a main function, like. For Java program, you must have to write one main function, right, or getting entry into the main application. So in Spring Boot also, you need one class where you have to define the main function, and you have to write this Spring Boot application annotation, because you must have to tell the compiler that this application is a Spring Boot application, and configuration you can use @configuration. Suppose you are using uh, anything. Suppose you are using schedulers in Spring Boot, then you have to write annotation uh, uh, that you are using scheduler, or if you are using Spring Batch, so you have to define in configuration that you are using Spring Batch. So in configuration file, you must have to define those things. If you are using XML, then you have to define those things in XML. If you are using annotation-based uh, Spring application, so you have to define in your configuration file. And also for the dependencies. One second. I will explain the below questions after this. One second. Yeah, for Spring configuration, suppose you have some dependencies. Suppose yeah, same thing. If you have Postgres, you have to connect to Postgres database or MySQL database. Then in POM file, here, yeah, here in POM file, yeah, you are using Swagger, so you have to define the dependency in the pom.xml. In normal application, suppose you are not using Spring Boot or some Spring framework, you are using normal JSP servlet or normal Java application, then you have to download the jar file, put it into the your lib folder. You have to give the build. You have to what you can say, give the in build path. You have to mention that this application requires this jar file. Everything you just define those things in your application, right? So, but in Spring, you don't have to care about these things. You just have to give the dependency here in POM file that we are going to use this Swagger thing, or we are going to use this Postgres database or MySQL database. You have to just give in pom.xml, and it will download all dependencies there. Suppose you are using Maven, then in user folder, whenever you run your project, it will create. Let me show you one thing. Here in my PC, in my user user folder, .m2 folder is created. If you have run your Proman project, then check in your computer also, in your username, that m2 folder is created. All the dependencies are downloaded here, right? Um, I think you guys don't know about this. You have to learn how Maven works. Maven downloads all your dependencies in your on your machine. It makes one repository, and that is this is the default folder for Maven to download the dependencies on your machine. So .m2 folder, and inside .m2 folder it creates its repository and download all these required dependencies, your jar file and all. Suppose I'm using MySQL, then this MySQL connector, it downloads its jar. You can see here. If I'm using normal Java application, if I use, then I download these MySQL connector Java file and put it into my lib folder, and put into the give the in the build path. I have to mention that I am using this jar file. But in Maven and Gradle, they maintain your repository. Actually, what is the advantage of using this Maven and Gradle? Uh, Suppose I have 10 different Java application, and every time I'm using MySQL and I'm connecting to my MySQL, then uh, in each project I have to give the jar file there. I have to put jar file inside that project, right? Uh, in 10 application, I have to put jar file in each lib folder of each project, right? So we use these things, Maven and Gradle, where they maintain their own repository. So it downloads only once, it keeps only one copy, and it is used for all projects. I think you get it, right? If you have doubt on this, you can just put into the question answer section. I think you get it, right? It download only once, and it used for all projects. It maintains its repository. Okay. Suppose I delete this. I just delete this MySQL folder. Okay. If I delete this one and again build my project, Maven clean install, I just run the command Maven clean install, or in Eclipse I just right click on my project and run my. I just run my. Actually, it is not configured in my application. I want to run this ProMan project. So I'm just running my personal project. Here you can see Maven build. So whenever I run this command, Maven clean install Maven build, then it downloads all dependent jar file and put into my common repository, where I can download the repository, and in multiple projects I use the same jar file. Okay. If you guys have any doubt about Maven, just put it into question section. Some guys are asking question. One second. When we work on image hoster and technical blog application, we defined endpoints as well, where those APIs as well. Okay. Database configuration should also be updated in localhost.properties. Okay. Also regarding Maven, when build runs, then does it also run for all modules? This is the good question. I will explain all this one by one, but put all this in question answer. Don't put into the chat. Okay, let me explain these questions first. For Maven, when build runs, then does it also run all modules? Yeah. Actually, if you guys go through the Proman project, you can see Proman is the what you can say basic project, and all these three are the modules, right? You guys understand what are the project module, and what is the main project, and what are the modules, right? So in uh, main project, we have to define those modules, right? if we run the main project pom.xml, then it will run automatically run the dependent model pom.xml. So no need if you change anything in the Proman API or anything in the Proman DB or service, uh, you just have to run pom.xml from the base project. Then it will automatically run your dependent pom.xml files from the models. Okay. Do you guys have any question in this? Okay, let me take another question. Database configuration. Yeah, database configuration. I think it is also in localhost dot properties. Yeah. Who asked this question? Suchi, just check your host dot properties file. Here, database connections is defined here. You are using you have installed Postgres on your local machine. So just check it is a local host, your port number, your database name, user, and password. Okay. Uh, and the question. When we work on image hoster and technical blog application, we define endpoints as well. Where those APIs as well? Yeah. Whatever whatever you have written in the controller with the URL path, then it is an API, right? Whatever you are calling from the client to server, whatever you are calling are nothing but in these APIs. Suppose, let me give you an example. Where is the controller? Yeah, this is sign up controller, right? Here I am calling this slash sign up, right? From client side, I just have to call localhost port slash sign up. Then it will directly come to the sign up controller, because we have written here at the REST controller. It automatically checks which in which controller you have to check. It just check in the controller files and check your URL path and cause those APIs. So your question was whatever. Let me read your question again. Uh, uh, Sandeepan was asking, when we work on image hoster and technical blog application, we define endpoints as well. Where those APIs as well? Yes, if you are defining endpoints and calling from client to server, then those are the APIs, right? Okay. It's not getting created. Suchi is asking. Uh, okay, Suchi, you are trying to say in Postgres, the tables are not getting created, right? Then your application is not connected with the database. Just check your database credential, and also whenever you hit mvn clean install command, just check all the dependencies are getting downloaded or not, and also check in .m2 folder. Here .m2 folder repository, your Postgres folder is getting created or not, right? And so in my other project I use MySQL, so it creates MySQL folder and download all dependencies here like this. So if you are running Proman project, then Postgres folder must have to create here in .m2 folder repository, and here in Postgres. So it must download. If it is not getting download, you can manually download or put it here, or you can directly give in build path. You can directly tell the compiler that take jar file from here. So like I think you are using Spring Boot, so it will allow or not. Let me check. Suppose I have this project. It has build path. So here you can give a direct external link to your jar files, war file, or any other module, anything. So you can give link like this. Okay, but we did not use response entity class in that case. Then okay, Sandeepan, you are asking about which project? hoster, image hoster, right? I haven't checked that code yet. Yeah. Can you give okay, in a in hoster, do you have URLs like this? Okay, let me then download this code. Okay, you are saying URL is present, then it is right? You are calling from client. You just try one thing. Whatever URL you have given here, just call it from Postman or SOAP UI or anything, whatever you are using. Just call it and check request is going to the server or not. If it is taking your request, then it is an API, right? But the return type is response. It doesn't matter. One second. You are confused with the return type, right? One second. This is response entity, right? I can directly send my DTO to the in the response, or I can write into the response entity. Actually, let me give you an example of my personal project. One second. I understand what you're trying to say. Uh, Suppose here is my controller. Let me give example of profile controller. Okay. Uh, Here I'm sending directly my. Actually, this is wrong. We don't have to send directly model class or your entity class. You must have to send your DTO. But I was just doing some R&D, so I have directly written the model class. So it doesn't matter if you are sending your DTO into the response entity or you are directly send the DTO. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I already said it is the common contract between the client and the server. Whatever request you require on the server side and what response you are sending, it is the common agreement. So you can give it in any format, in XML, JSON, or normal text, or anything, right? I can here I'm just sending the exception user ID not found something, right? So it is just an string, right? But if I have this profile in my database, I am sending the record, right? This is the this is the post method. Actually, I'm adding new profile here, right? And here I'm just calling my DAO class, and I'm just inserting a record into the database. And if it is successfully inserted, then I'm returning the same record in the response. Okay, so if I got some exception on server side, then what I'm saying, normal string. You can check here. I'm just sending user ID not found, right? So it is not my profile model. So I'm just trying to say you can send anything to the client side. It is just a common contract between client and the server. So before creating any API, you must have to define what request you require and what response you are saying, right? So you are saying you are sending response entity. Doesn't matter. I can write here response entity like this, right? It will just send. I have to import dependencies. Response. I have to just import it. So you can send like this also. It doesn't matter. But here I am sending the model class. It will directly get converted into JSON because in my POM file I am using Jackson. Jackson is used for uh, converting your Java object into the JSON object. It is used for conversion, suppose. Oh, one second. There it goes. Yeah, we did not do that. Okay, you can do any in any what you can say. You can do anything. You can use response entity. You can use normal string. You can use no, JSON. You can use anything. Here I'm consuming JSON data, so I have written here consumes application /JSON. If I want to send if I want to send the JSON data to the client in the response, so I will write here produces, and here I have write here the application slash JSON, right? Understand? So it doesn't matter whatever you are sending. Just your client must know what in what format you are sending. That's it. You can use anything. Okay, let's move to next question. All credentials are correct. Okay. Postgres folder is not there in empty folder. Okay, then your build is not successful. You haven't downloaded haven't downloaded its dependencies correctly. So just check why Postgres dependencies are not downloaded, or do one thing: directly download and put it into your repository folder. It will also work. Yeah, we did. Jackson is not used. Oh, you are not using Jackson, but you can use for converting your Java object into the JSON, directly into the JSON. Why do we define repository class in service class? Okay, let me go into the code. 1 second. Where it is service class? I can't see any. Okay, it is in another project. Oh, I haven't downloaded that one. But let me check here. We have repository or something. It is normal. Actually, I think you have gone through the MVC architecture, right? So in MVC architecture, you just distinguish your models, your views, and your service layer, right? So whatever, whenever user from client, whenever whatever you are calling, it first comes into the controller, and from controller it goes to your service layer, right? And from service layer it goes to your DAO, because we direct and directly expose our DAO layer. We can't call it directly, right, from controller. We must have some service layer in between. I think in MVC session I will explain when we use a service layer, how why we put it separately: controller part, service part, and DAO layer. All this I will explain this in MVC architecture session. Why do we define repository classes in service class? Service module. I mean service. Uh, okay, I'll explain here. Actually, we have very less time, so okay, let me explain this thing. In MVC architecture, we have view, model, and controller, right? And for view, we have UI part, client side part. I don't have to explain those things to you. And in model and controller, in controller, all your APIs are defined in your controller, your URL, your endpoints, and everything, right? And from controller, from client request to your fetch your data from database and send response to the calling API. I mean to the request to a client. You have to go through the service layer, your DAO layer, everything, right? So first request comes into controller, from controller to your service layer, because we don't directly call your DAO layer, right? You must have to write some business logic in between, correct? In controller, we never write any business logic. In controller, we just take the request and send the response, and we call our service layer. We don't write any business logic in our controller, correct? And from controller we call our service layer. In service layer we just write our logic, our business logic, and from service layer we call our DAO layer. In DAO layer we have our database connectivity, we have our queries there in DAO layer, and whatever data written from the database, we just send it to the service layer. And in service layer, we just manipulate, we just add something, or we calculate something, we write some business logic on that data, and we put it into the DTO and send it to the again send it back to the controller, and from controller we send it back to the client, right? So this is how MVC architecture works. I think you have covered these things into the your MVC architecture lesson. I mean, so I just thought it would be more appropriate to declare it in Proman DB module instead of Proman service module. No, no. Proman DB module is only for executing your queries. You are to connect your database to run your queries. Your all database credentials comes into the Proman DB, and this is not the service layer. All your business logic comes into the Proman service model, right? Okay, let me. Uh, Actually, we have very less time. Just ask me the question if you have any doubts. I think I have explained you. Uh, what do you mean DTO? DTO, data transfer object. We can't directly send our model class, our entity class to the uh, client, right? We use the data transfer object. No, DAO is different. Data access object. Data access layer is different. DAO layer is different. DAO layer is used to uh, take data from your database, uh, take your uh, all your database things goes into the DAO layer. DTO is nothing but the Java class. It's let me show you one DTO class. One second. I have an example for you. Uh, yeah, this one is my personal project. Here I have created one DTO folder, and here all DTOs are come into the DTO. Suppose I just given you the profile example, right? Here is my profile DTO. Okay, it is nothing but the DTO, data transfer object. You can say it, some guys says a VO, value object. Someone says it's the DTO. One second. Okay, let me minimize this one. Okay, I think I have explained these things. Okay, only one question is remaining about the DTO. I think other questions I have answered. Okay, let me explain you what is a DTO. It is nothing but a data transfer object. Someone call it VO, value object. You can name it anything. In we say it data transfer object. Here I have add profile example, right? Let me give it again. Okay, here I'm this is the add profile API, right? Here I'm just calling the profile API. I'm giving this JSON object. I'm calling this post method, right? Then in controller it goes to the profile controller. Okay. Here it comes into the this API, right? Here, because it has post mapping, post method, it consumes JSON, so it satisfy our request, correct? And here I am writing request body as a profile TTO, not my profile model, not my entity, not my database entity where I have written my all database columns, its ID and everything. So I just written here my DTO, because whatever data user sends data from the request, I'm taking all these user input, user request into this DTO, and it will automatically map with my DTO. Whatever I have sent from the request, this name, date of birth, time of birth, all these things will automatically get mapped to this DTO, because it's the same uh, fields I have defined in the profile DTO. So it will get automatically mapped with my DTO, and if I write profile dot get name, get date of birth, then I will get those things. One second, let me check in ProMan how we use. Yeah, you named it as a request. So instead of request, I write DTO, because um, in what we can say in technical term, we call it a DTO, not uh, that for what we say. It is a naming convention. We use those object Java object class as a DTO. Okay. Yeah, request model. You can say it request model. You can say anything, but in technical term, we say it DTO. Okay. Let me explain your JWT and all. I think I have very less time, so we have to move fast. Uh, okay. Uh, do I need to explain you what is Swagger or these things? I think you guys work on this, so okay. Let me give you basic examples of basic things about this Swagger. Swagger is a plugin, is a tool which is I just said someone is typing. Don't type into the chat section. Type into the question answer. Yeah, in response model, you can say anything. I just said it is a contract between the client and the server, right? So you define your project manager or your architect will decide what APIs we have to call, what type of APIs you have to create, what type of request it will take, what type of response it will send. Okay, so response model is nothing but what response you are sending, right? So yes, in response, send your DTO, your model, your whatever you say that what you use, sign up request. You use what you use there, sign up user request. Say anything. You can say named it anything, right? You just have to define its return type only, and you can use the Jackson to convert directly this entity into the JSON object, right? Okay, from now just type your questions into the question answer. Okay, yeah, Suchi is asking what is JWT. Yeah, I'm going to the next section. Okay, till now, do you have any question? I think these are the simple things. You will get all these things on internet also. Okay, shall I move ahead? Okay, okay. I'm moving ahead. I'm just we have lots of things to cover, so I'm just skipping these things. I think no need to explain what is Swagger. Swagger is nothing but it's just a tool. I just said you have to suppose I have written some API. How my client will know what would be the request, what would be the response, which type of HTTP methods will come when exception occurs. All these things we defined into the Swagger, and it will automatically creates your request response, or it makes your UI so that the client will check oh, this type of API, this URL we have to call, this request we have to send, this type of response we will get. All these things are taken care by Swagger. Again, someone is typing into the chat. Let us wrap up in. Okay. Okay, we use a Swagger for the for showing the request response or giving the exceptions. What is with the HTTP status code when exception occurs? All these things. What will be the success message when the user successfully registered, and what will be the message? All these things are defined into the Swagger, and it will give you human readable format to the client, to the who's calling your API. So this is the use of Swagger. And here they just explain how you configure your Proman project, your POM file. POM file you have POM file is used to define your dependencies. It will directly download your dependencies into the repository. I just showed you in .m2 folder in repository. It will download all your dependencies into the repository folder, right? Okay. Uh, let's move ahead. Uh, Here in this video, they explain how your Swagger works, how you make your backend APIs, how this sign up JSON works. Okay, do you have any question about sign up JSON or something? Okay, okay, I'm moving ahead. Maven dependencies. I just explained how you define dependencies into the pom.xml. we have to define its artifact ID, version, everything. So you can name it anything. You can give group ID, anything, artifact ID. It just must be unique. Whatever your pom.xml will generate, suppose jar file, war file, it will give a name from this group ID, artifact ID. Okay, you can give anything. You can define version. Whenever you give a new build, you can increase your version number. Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, all the annotations used in the Swagger and your Spring Boot application at the rate entity component controller you have at the rate rest controller and all JSON property to convert your entity fields to the JSON controller class. Someone is asking question. Please explain about plugins. There are lots of plugins. As you can say, Maven is a plugin. You can say, uh, suppose I need some. I'm using some dependency. I have some using some external jar file or something. It is nothing but the plugin. You can say plugin anything, whatever dependency you require, whatever external things you are using, that is nothing but plugin. You can say Maven as a plugin. Okay, let's move ahead. Controller class, here you define your endpoints, your APIs, your request details into the controller, and from controller you send response to the client, calling client. Response body, whatever in response body you define what type of response you are sending to the client. So it is denoted by the @response body annotation. REST controller, I just explained this. Request mapping, whatever mapping slash sign up slash movie slash ad, these are nothing but the request mapping. We have just defined the URL in the controller. Here this we have to define this path, and the method is post, get, or something. Media type, like I just said, JSON or something, or any PDF you are uploading, any MP3 media type or something. You have to just define here, and what response we are sending, application slash JSON or something. So you are just have to explain this before your method in your controller path. Just have to explain this. Okay, someone, 1 second. I mean, plugin inside Maven. Yeah, in Maven also there are lots of things. Whatever according to your requirement, you can use those plugins, and you just have to define it in pom.xml. Like suppose, yeah, here I'm using Swagger, so I'm just writing here plugin. You can see plugin, right? So Swagger is what we can say. It is not a Spring Boot thing, right? It is an external plugin. So I'm using Swagger into my Spring Boot application, right? So it is nothing but a plugin. So I'm using this dependency. I'm using this jar file. I'm using this Swagger plugin into my Spring project. So I'm writing here defining Swagger into my plugin tag, right? So I have defined the Swagger here, and while building this project, it will automatically download the Swagger dependent jar file into my project, right? I think you understand what is plugin, right? So other than Swagger, suppose you are using JUnit test cases, okay? So you require JUnit jar file. If you are using integration test cases, unit test cases, then you require it's a dependent jar file, right? Then you must have to define it in plugin. So whatever external things you are using in your Spring Boot, whatever external jars you require, just define it here. It will automatically download. Okay. Okay, let's move ahead. Return type of sign up. Yeah, return type. I just explained. You can write anything. Response entity is nothing but it's just whatever you have written inside the response, it just convert it into your whatever you have written into the produces produces like applications like JSON text or something. You just convert it and send it as a response to the client. YML is nothing but similar to dot properties file. It is nothing but a normal file where we can give configurable things into the YML file. Suppose database credential, your anything. Uh, Suppose I just show you uh, here we have uh, uh, database details, data source, and all. So in YML, you can use .yml or you can use dot properties file also, because these are the configurable things. If you write these things into the Java file, then you have to compile, you have to make jar file and everything. So the advantage of using YML or dot properties file is it is whatever configurable things you have in your application, you can put it into the YML file, and you can directly change into your YML file. If any configuration changes, then no need to deploy the project again and again, and no need to make another jar file, war file, and no need to deploy it on different environment. And you just have to change your YML or properties file, and it will take an effect immediately into your project. So you don't need to restart and everything. Okay, I think no more doubts in the question answer tab. I'm just moving ahead. Creating and configuring database. Suji, just check these things. I think you missed something from here. Just check it is downloading your dependencies or not, or your database username password is correct or not. Your port number is working. Only check one more thing. I think you are using port 5432. Just check same port number is using by any other application or not. Just uh, ping to that port, use telnet command or something, and just check on your machine this port is open or not, or and just check your firewall if maybe it is stopping you to connect to the database. Here are the tables you are using Proman. I think JPA and Hibernate is pending, so I'm just directly going to Hibernate thing. Let me explain you from my personal project. In model, I have created some here have some entities. You can say it entity or you can say it model, anything. Here I'm giving you the table name. I'm giving at the rate entity annotation, and on for which table I'm writing this class. I have to define it here with the at the rate table annotation, and whatever primary key I have, if it is auto generated, then I have to write a generated value, and its strategy like this auto or what, and I have to define at the rate ID here. And if I have many to one to many relationship between tables, then I have to define with at the rate many to one to many annotation. And on which column I'm joining, I have to define with at the rate join column. If I have to delete the dependent record uh, from the child table, for that I have to write on delete annotation, and when it must be led, we have to give this on delete what action it should perform. So we have to give all these things in the entity configuration. So here profile model, we are using many to one relationship between profile model and user model. So I have to define it here, and we can allow validation here on entity. Suppose on a table, name must not be empty, so I must have to write at the rate not empty annotation here, and for date we have to write temporal, or here also we have relationship. many to one. So I have just write at the rate many to one annotation and column. Okay, these are the entities defined in the our project. So whenever we define those entities, if let me explain one more thing. Here in my application.properties file, I have written Hibernate DDL auto update. What it does actually, if I write DDL auto update, then it will automatically create my table. Or if I have to change some column or something, then I just have to change it into my model class. It will then automatically change my columns or anything directly from my database. So this parameter is important. Whenever you are running your application or something, just check your DDL auto configuration is given into your project or not. So data source, I just defined it in my properties file. Okay, the model, and I was explaining about you the JPA. Okay, uh, let me go directly into the DAO layer. So in my, I'm just directly explaining you how we use JPA. Sandeepan is asking one question. How do we configure our Spring project so we do not have to restart Tomcat every time we change something? Okay, I have changed the port to 5433 and it's working. Okay, Suchi, congrats. Okay. Uh, how do we configure our Spring project so we do not have to restart Tomcat every time we change something? Yeah, I just said whatever configurable things you have in your project, just put it into your YML file or in your properties file. Then you and also uh, there's some configuration that you have to write some code to automatically change your take your properties file. If you change anything into your properties file, then it will automatically take into your application. So you can write any what we can say monitoring things something into your project that it will monitor your properties file. If it is update or something, then whatever changes you have change in your properties or YML file, it will just take and what it is take and change your configuration automatically. You have to write some code for that. Okay, small. Okay, you want to change the port number. So in properties file, you just have to change your port like this. Hey, can you see server dot port, and you can change port directly from here. Suppose right now I'm running with 8080. I can change from 80 to 82. This you have to just define your properties file or YML file. It will directly Spring Boot. You don't have to write code for that. You just have from it. You can like. Okay, I think questions are finished. I was explaining you about the JPA. Suppose you want to save something into your table, so you don't need to write any query for that. You just call your repo or your DAO and DAO dot save method. It will directly save your data into the database. Let me take one example. This is the ad hoc repo, and I'm just directly going to my controller. Okay, and here in my post method, this one post method, what I'm doing, I'm just calling my repo dot save method and my object. This is my model. Actually, this is not the right practice. We have to first take it into a DTO, or what we can you say your request model, request model. What do you say? into your request model. From request model, you have to map your request model to your actual entity class, and then you have to call your DAO object dot save method and your entity object. It will directly save your record into database, your object into the database. So no need to write save method. The JPA will do all these things. So once again, you can see this is my simple JPA repository class, and it is the save method is written here. So it will directly create a new record into your database. So no need to write any extra code to save or save anything into your database. So this is the save method. And whenever you want something, your customized query, then you can write like this @query and from your entity class and your condition. So you can write your customized query like this. And here I want to retrieve the list of records where is active, value is active. So I just write condition here and write such type of query and call this from my uh, object plus this method like this. And here's my API to get all ad hoc. So I just call this method my DAO object, or I can say repo. You can name it anything, and I just call this method. It will create a query automatically with this condition that is active equal to this active. So we can write customized query like this. If we have any transactional query, for that we have to write @transactional annotation. If we are actually we are updating some records here, so we have to give @modifying annotation, and whatever query you have to write, you can write like this. And here I'm sending a parameter to the query. So I had just write like this (1). So whatever parameter I'm sending is just map this parameter directly into the query like this. If we have another parameter, then I can write anything status equal to like this, and whatever second parameter it has, we just take like this. This second parameter will automatically map here. So JPA gives this flexibility to write your own customized query. Someone is asking a question: can we keep application.yml file inside service model? Uh, Actually, there is a basic structure of your Java project. You can keep anything anywhere. You can keep controller into the service folder. You can put your DAO classes into your controller folder. You can do anything, but the standard says the Java standard says you have to distinguish these things. You have to put your related file names into your proper folder. You have to maintain proper folder structure. You can keep this YML file anywhere, but whenever you use this YML, you have to give the path of the properties file. If you put it into the resource folder, then Spring Boot will automatically take your YML file or properties file. But if you are keeping it somewhere else, then you have to write some code to get the. You have to give some give you path where your YML or properties file you kept. You have to define those path into your code, like where your resources are kept. So you have to write code for that. If you don't want to write code, just follow the basic structure of a Spring Boot project. Yeah, question you ask: can we keep application.yml file to our another folder? Yes, you can keep, but Spring Boot, if you follow Spring Boot folder structure, then no need to write extra code. You can directly use the application.yml file anywhere in your project. It just take into your resources folder and take your properties file or YML file. So I think I answered your question. You can keep anywhere, but you just have to write code where you kept those properties file or YAM file. It's just that you have to write some extra code for it. You can keep anywhere. Okay, I think we are out of the time right now. Let me explain some more things to you. Uh, I have to cover lots of things. Exceptions are pending, and also JWT, yeah, authentication is pending. Okay, we have another session on Sunday about MVC architecture. Then we can cover these things in that session. I think we are already complete near about 2 hours, so we can take the remaining points on Sunday 11 a.m. Is it okay? And whatever doubts you have, just note it down. We can take it on Sunday, and I will try to explain you your doubts, your question, whatever you have. And on Sunday, we have to cover MVC architecture, and also I will cover the pending points like JWT and your exception handling. And one second, what is pending? Yeah, exception and password encryption, JWT token base 64 encoding, image hoster example. I will explain image hoster example on Sunday. So if you have any, if you face any problem with Proman project or image hoster project, just note it down and ready with your questions on whatever doubts you have about these two projects. Just ask me on Sunday 11 a.m. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you. I'm disconnecting this call. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think someone has one question. No, he's just saying thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bye.